Okay, I apologize for that. Okay, over the past several months, the residents in the area have met on this issue a number of times, and basically their concern is that this application is excessive and inappropriate, but what they have wished to do in this is to put forward a proposal that can be actually an amendment to the report that should satisfy everyone's concerns, and I think it's a very good solution. And I think that the councillors, when they're looking at this, we're not just looking at one piece of land. We have to look in the area that it is in, the block that is within. And the questions really that council has to look at is there's an opportunity here to unlock 120 units of social housing, which is part of the city's mandate. There are also questions as to fiscal management, as to how this process goes forward from here and the decisions made. And it does end up with councillors having to look at how they're dealing with their stewardship over public assets and how one handles the balance of intensification in an area and what represents good planning. In the diagram on the right here, you see the crossroads of Eglinton, and on the far right is Yonge, and we know where the town center is there. And the site in question is the red square at the top, which represents the transition between the center and the residential neighborhood to the west of it, which is house farm neighborhood. And the block that it is on right now is a house farm neighborhood with a residential neighborhood, but with a designation for apartments. And I wish to draw your attention to the fact that it is a corner site at the very edge of the town center where the transition occurs to neighborhood. And it's very similar to what was just completed a while ago in terms of the planning approvals. And that is at the corner of Berwick and Duplex below, where you see in green a similar site, which basically is the anchor and transition between the center and the surrounding established neighborhood. Come on. Okay, here we go. So in this second slide, what we see here is looking at the big sketch below is the southwest quadrant of the center, and in the very foreground of that, just above the big word planning, is the corner of Berwick and of Duplex, where you can see this transition project was done. And if we look across the top of the image, we actually see a panorama that's taken so that you're standing in the intersection at Duplex and Berwick, and so on the right is Duplex and Orchard View. So on your right is Orchard View Boulevard, looking towards Yonge. The center is on the left side of that, on the south side of that street. The site itself is this corner site, and you can see behind the parking lot, which is the site, the Toronto District Library lands, and upon that is the Stanley Knowles apartment building. And if we look straight up Duplex, then we see to the left there is the established residential neighborhood. So the applicants come forward. I've actually taken it and overlaid it in this where the red angle is, and what you see in that just blue outline is the cross-sectional profile of the application that's in the planning report before you now, and what is in the line drawing and in the brown shows you what was done at the corner of Berwick and Duplex and how it meets the angular planes, just to give you an idea of how the transition respected planning. Now, in this slide here, we're looking at the matter of area planning. So the site is the left-hand corner there where you see the numbers 3, 6, and 20, which represents the heights of the different portions of the building. But in looking at the area planning, you have to look at the fact that between the existing Stanley Knowles Tower and this proposed site and its tower is the opportunity of building, or what they call unlocking, social housing, in the sense that it's very hard to find affordable sites for this type of housing. And that is actually interwoven in the decision. What I have here, we'll go over, is a proposal that shows how all this can be accomplished at the same time. The second issue is that the developer, in acquiring this site, has taken no interest in assembling the whole site, and so we end up with a residual at the north end. It's marked in brown as a patch called North Parcel, which is 3 houses, which are going to be left in a state that I basically call neither fish nor fowl. There'll be the only 3 houses on the block, and yet not of a nature that can be improved upon in the future. So that needs to be dealt with. I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. If you look at the one page you have in front of you, I'm actually going to be talking my way down the list, okay? So at the top there, we're talking about social housing, and then we're going to talk about, planning the block. So if I just jump from here to the next slide, what's happening is that, I'll go back for a second, the applicant is proposing that he build his tower so it's only some 1.2 meters away from the property line, and on that side to have 4 units of apartments that look exclusively to the east. So really for their view area, they're not accommodating it on the land, they're going to accommodate it by the fact that they look over the library's lands, and in that sense they're usurping the ability for development on that site. Now, if we look at this, we see on the left an example of a contemporary building going up that's within intensification and all those good things in planning. And you'll notice that the building is not built that close to the property line. The property line runs just about where those blue garbage cans are on the left picture. So they have provided enough view area within their own lands so that no matter what happens next door, those are tangible units. And likewise, they reciprocate with the other units being able to look back. If we look on the right, we see another condition of encroachment where a building is built very close to the property line, and this is another building on Eglinton itself, and you can see what's happening there. They're so close to the property line, they have no windows. And what I'm proposing should be realized in this scheme is that if they're that close to the property line, they shouldn't have any windows on that side, because it usurps the right for Stanley Knowles to build. And now the convention really in the City of Toronto, when you have buildings that close to each other, we're familiar with solutions such as the semi-detached house, or we know the row house, or the row shops on Yonge you can see there, etc. And I've shown you examples of high-rise as well. And what happens there is it makes sense that you do your buildings back-to-back in a zero lot line configuration. And in doing that, Stanley Knowles could actually build an addition on its west side that could accommodate 120 units. And that is something that, in approving this proposal, where they are basically building zero lot line, and on the other hand, if somebody is to build in a like manner on the other side of the line, only 1.2 meters apart, you would have an untenable situation for housing. So it makes sense that this get cleared up at this time. And the proposal that we have in here is that in the course of doing the zoning amendment for this site, that the same conditions that are given to the applicant on his side of the line should be granted, on the other hand, to the library site in a mere fashion, reciprocal fashion, so whatever is good for the developer is good to be built on the adjacent site. And what I would hope out of that is they would come to an agreement where they basically go back to back and therefore both get to build. And if they both build, then in actuality, the city will be meeting its interests in terms of intensification, in that there will be actually more units built in that manner than if you allow just this applicant to build or if the library were to build. So it's not something that's saying, let's not, we don't want to see the city grow. But I'm saying that as much as he's looking at it as a device to enable him to build, the same principle of approaching the property line can be utilized by the city and its public assets to say, fine, that's good, you want to do that, we'll do that too, and we all win. Now, this gives you an indication here of what I called neither fish nor fowl, and I'm saying that in planning, preparing this rezoning or amended zoning for this site, they should extend it as well as towards the Stanley Knowles side. They should also extend it to the north, and therefore provide in the future for these 3 individual houses that are there the opportunity to flow naturally at some point in the future into a comprehensive position in the block. And the 2 things there are basically to carry forward the provisions for the first 3 stories in the applicant's site, and in addition, one other item, and that is to include for the capability for this site to the north, in the future at some point, to be able to access the underground parking, putting their own ramp in. It's such a small site, they won't be able to do their own parking. Therefore, nothing will happen. On the other hand, it's only 3 houses. They'll sit there, and they don't belong to the block. And my concern is it's going to be like you go into Washington, D.C., and there are all these little triangles of land that drives the city crazy because nothing can happen to them. Anyway, so we move down that list on that page. The next thing to deal with here is the matter of enhancing the public realm. And what you will see in here is the matter of looking at what the setback should be. And it proposes in that one sheet, everything on this one sheet is basically an amendment that planning could take to their report, and it would achieve the results that the community wants to see. So on the south side, on Orchard View Boulevard, would be to actually, you see there's a red line, and Orchard View Boulevard was built in line with the residential houses in the neighborhood. Okay, so the thing there would be to have a 4-meter front setback, okay? But the whole thing is to make sure that all of the street allowance lands are used appropriately for the betterment of the community. This building is not intending to really supply any landscape open space, and it's very similar in a sense to the buildings we see here below. And by making sure that we look after the public realm, then we will end up with a good balance. We went through and we looked at, here we're getting the massing of things. That was some of the angular plane issues in the applicant's proposal. And we went through a process looking at what could be done. And we came up and we all agreed to a tall and thin approach to the building. And that is embodied in here. And we talk about their articulating the massing going up. And we've actually incorporated some of the things that the developer the other day was mentioning himself. And there we're showing the massing of what they're proposing. And beneath that, you can see the massing that we're proposing. The whole thing there is, if we can keep the base in good order and get a decent height, that's terrific. And so what we are looking at here in total is a building that is actually 20 stories tall, that being taller than the 17 discussed before, and permitting a total of 20,000 square meters. And that is what this page is. So what we're looking to see is whether council would, in its wisdom, on the basis of what we put together, look at these as being, and it is a list I put together, that can be amendments to the report to revise it, and with that you have a solution that the community is in favor of. And I must say in closing, the community has worked very hard not to be naysayers, and they have come forward and they've worked very hard, and I must say for a lot of them to get to this as a solution is what I call sort of a warts and all challenge, where everybody said, okay, we're all in favor of coming forward to something which has a solution, something that can work, and we're tired of having 8 years of harangue, and this represents a good and balanced solution.
Any questions of the speaker? Councillor Jenkins?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mills, this solution, have you presented it to the proponent, the applicant?
Karen has she's had discussions with him. I haven't had direct contact.
So perhaps Councillor Stintz will talk to it, but I'm just wondering if you, do you know what the applicant's view of the
No, I have not had direct contact with them.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Okay.